on the episode today, we have Eric G. Eric, welcome.
Oh, thank you for having me, Thomas.
It is very much my pleasure. Would you like to take a moment and tell the audience a bit about yourself and what you do?
Well, I'm an author and a writing and life coach, and I know that's a weird combination, writing and life coach, and not always put those two together. But yeah, that's basically what I do. It came about because originally my background is in screenwriting or creative writing, and I was teaching writing, and I figured out that the easiest way to teach writing was to teach people how to find their own voice, because I think a lot of times students will focus on grammar or focus on things of that nature, where really it's more about how do you speak, how do you express yourself. And the easiest way to find your own voice, or really the only way to find your own voice, is to find yourself. So that's where the life coaching came in. I owned an education company for about a decade, and I studied personality typing, and I developed my own personality typing methodology to help people find themselves. And thus I wrote a book about it that was published this year. So I'm really happy and excited about it.
You should be. Congratulations. How's it all going?
It's going well, like I'm doing podcasts like this one, trying to promote it. I was on the news, which is kind of fun here in LA, my local television. And I think it's a topic that a lot of people are really interested in, but there's a lot of stuff out there. And I think a lot of stuff can get lost in the shuffle. I mean, a lot of people are familiar with MBTI and, or other words, Myers-Briggs, the Enneagram, DISC, and all those types of different testing methods. So it's more about like showing why mine is different and more fun and yada yada yada, that kind of stuff.
Okay. Well, I did take the assessment. I don't know whether
Wait,
you
don't
know
tell
that
me.
before I
Wait, don't tell me what you got. Sorry, I want to jump in and guess what you got, but later on, I don't know. I love doing that.
Yeah,
Just
go for it.
that I could be
It'll
wrong.
be like a cliffhanger for the episode. We'll find out at the end whether you get it.
I
But
hope
do
so.
you find that people, because one of the things that I immediately noticed about myself is that I was to some degree invested or hoping for a particular animal because they're kind of each personality type has its own animal, right? So do you find that people want to be a particular animal even before they start the test?
It's funny if they do know what the animals are, then yes. It's funny because a friend of mine and who actually motivated me to write this book, because at this moment I was writing, or at least like 5 years ago, I was writing screenplays and pilots, and she was like, "No, you should write a book on your personality types because that's what everyone's talking about at this bar. We're talking about it." And I was like, "No," and so then she actually put it on the television show that she was working on. She was writing one episode, and people were taking a personality test, and it was literally, that was one of the jokes, was this guy who's kind of timid, but he ends up getting the lion, and everyone's like, "Oh my God," like he's super proud of being the lion, right? And it ends up that he's actually took the test wrong, and he's actually a mouse. Which, by the way, those are two animals that are not on my personality typing methodology, because clearly I don't think anyone would want to be a mouse. But yeah, I mean, people like to be foxes. I think foxes like to be foxes. The actual personality type, when they hear what they are, like, "Oh yeah, I'm cool." And I think when we hear the animal fox, I think we know what that person's like. And I think people tend to gravitate towards that, where you're not going to get too many people saying, "Oh, I want to be a beaver. I'm so happy to be a beaver." Like, it's kind of like sounds a little boring. But I'm thankful that we have a lot of beavers in the world, animals and people personality types, because I think those are the people who keep like things in order. And we need that as well. So yeah, definitely people gravitate and try to answer questions a certain way to try to maybe get a personality that they want, which is not a good thing, but that happens.
Well, yeah, if you were to take the assessment, or if someone were to, I think it's useful in the sense that you get to know a little bit more about yourself. But in addition to that, what can they expect from, knowing a bit more about themselves?
The easiest thing is just understanding what you want most of all in life, right? Like, it's your desire. Like, and I think sometimes we get confused because we're brought up in a way where if your personality type doesn't necessarily match maybe the people who raised you, maybe the people you're around, then I think that can be confusing, because you'll be like, "Oh, I think I should want these things," whereas deep down inside you might not. And I think that causes a lot of conflict. So at the very least, you should figure out, or to help you solidify, "Oh yeah, this is what I truly want out of life. This is what makes me happy. And even though it's different than the things around me that I'm hearing, I need to be confident that this is truly who I am, and let me go for this." And then, of course, that helps in a lot of different aspects of life, right? Like relationships, obviously careers, working with, dealing with either your parents, or if you are a parent and your children. like just understanding that people around us are different and they value different things. And we need to be able to appreciate that, because if we try to change them, then clearly that's not going to end up well, at least not at like a psychological or emotional level.
Yeah, I can imagine it being useful for relationships, actually, especially if you get the other person to take the test and then you can understand them more, as you said. What about yourself? Did you take the assessment perhaps after you'd done all the work to make it? And what was that like?
It's so I got into personality typing because of the MBTI test, which I think a lot of people are familiar with. And mine has 16 different animal personality types, which is very similar to the MBTI, which has 16. So a lot of times people say, oh, they're the same thing. And I did study it quite a bit. And mine evolved from it, I like to say, but I did the way that I go about figuring out what someone's personality type is different than how the MBTI does it. But I did study that quite a bit. So when I originally took it, I figured out what my animal was, or not my animal. I guess they have 4 letters. So whatever my 4-letter combination was. And that did impact the way I kind of saw the world. But then I started, especially working with kids. Owning my education company, we had about 1,000 students a year that we'd work with, not including just those 1,000 students, but also the teachers that I hired and worked for me, and then the parents for each of those kids. And I think you start realizing, oh, the MBTI dichotomy of extroverted versus introverted doesn't really work all the time. It tends to be contextual. So I started trying to figure out different ways to be more accurate in terms of describing people and determining which particular personality type they fit. So I think that was my personal experience with that. And it grew over time just from obviously practical knowledge, but also theoretical knowledge, which came first. And that's, how I developed my methodology.
Okay, well done. Just out of interest, because lots of people use the terms extrovert, introvert. Is there what would you say? What makes them simplistic, if you would use those words?
No, I mean that's a good way to put it. I think a lot of times, I mean, we focus on energy and they're like, oh, it's not just about who talks a lot, it's about where your energy comes from. But I think even in that instance, our energy comes from different places based on our competing values, right? So my methodology, there's 4 different large groups of people, and then within those groups there are 4 subgroups, obviously 4 times 4 is 16. But in each of those large major groups, I call them packs, of course, because we're dealing with animals, right?
Mhm.
They value different things. So, like the difference, an introverted and extroverted person within this particular pack is going to manifest themselves differently than in this particular pack, right? Like if someone focuses on like safety and security and being part of a community, then of course our traditional forms of understanding introversion, extroversion will be relevant, and that's about half the population. So that's why I feel like extroversion, introversion has caught on so much, especially introverts, right? Because it does pertain to about half the population, but there's like another half of the population that fits into the other 3 packs, and they value very different things. So if you value, let's say, information, then you're going to respond a lot differently based on those things versus someone who values community, and that's what I started finding out. And so that's why I guess basically that was a long way of saying, yes, it is a bit simplistic to just go introvert and extrovert. Do you talk a lot? Do you not? Where's your energy from? You know?
All right. Well, you've mentioned about how, people have taken the tests, and we talked about how they're invested in a particular animal. But what about kind of feedback that you've gotten from it? Have you got people who have come back to you and it's sort of helped them?
Yeah, I mean, obviously I work with clients all the time, and a lot of my clients are young students, maybe I usually start around 10, 11, 12. That kind of particular, there's 2 things for that. One, it's tough for everybody, right? Because that's when you're entering adolescence. But it's also tough for parents, because parents are like, God, what is wrong with my kid? Why are they not listening to me anymore? Why do they hate me? So generally they hire me and I go in there and I figure out, that's my first goal, is figuring out what personality type the student is, but I'm not particularly overt with it. Sometimes I can be, but for the most part, I try to like do it subtly. And I found that over time, over the course of time, I have students now, well, I guess former students who are like in their late 20s, who will like say, hey, like, I mean, I really felt like this really helped me figure out who I am, and it helped me pursue different paths than I was originally taking. And I think that's probably the most satisfying thing, is if I can help people figure out, hey, you're not a weirdo, just because you're a little different and the things that you want might be different than the things you've been told. you're okay. We can work to be a better version of yourself versus a better like a version that you're not really or who you really aren't, you know.
Okay. So I mentioned that I did take the test, but I haven't read the book yet. So for people who are interested, what is different or what is additional that they will get from the book that they wouldn't get from the assessment?
Well, I always say the book was meant to teach people how to be the test. I've always thought like, it was kind of odd that, we take these tests online, or let's say you buy a book and like the first like 2 pages are a test. Like, let's say it has like 70 questions. And regarding how you take the test, that means that you fit into a specific thing. And then the whole entire book are a bunch of prescriptions, right? But, what if the diagnosis is wrong, right? The test is just a test, it's cookie cutter. I don't think we'd go like if you go into like the doctor's office, the doctor spends most of his time diagnosing you, and then like the last like minute saying, okay, now that I know what I think is wrong with you, here's a prescription, right? But it's almost in reverse with these things where it's like, okay, let me do a little quick test. Okay, this is what's wrong with you. Let me spend like this whole book telling you what you should do. Whereas my book actually teaches people to become the test, right? So that they can start understanding themselves better, understanding the people around them better, and really truly understand the methodology and all the, for lack of a better term, all the tricks they can use to kind of read people properly. Because of course, people lie all the time. So there are a lot of things in the book that are like, okay, well, if you really want to figure out what a person is, do this, see their reaction, and if they react this way, then you're kind of gonna have a better indicator of who they are versus like what they tell you. Because we tell people everything, right? And especially if it's positive stuff. A lot of the books are they'll tell you, oh, naturally your personality type is really intelligent and great at school. And like, who's going to say no to that? They're, of course, going to be like, oh, yeah, that's me. Because, of course, it's like, it's confirmation bias, right? But for the most part, my book will totally, well, not totally, but it will help people learn how to read people better, and then kind of fit them into their personality type.
I didn't think about that. Apart from the parenting example that you referenced, I didn't think it would. It didn't occur to me that it would be useful learning other people's personality types. So, have you got like an example that you often use where you can describe the attributes of that particular character?
Yeah, it happened to me I've been using this story quite a bit. It happened to me over New Year's. So I guess, wow, that's like 9 months ago now, or 10 months ago almost. But I was shucking oysters with my cousin's kid. And I was teaching him how to shuck oysters, actually. And what I know of him is he's a shark. Shark personality types are very narrow focus. They're great at tools. They're very specific. They're hustlers. They will go on the fly. They will treat things as they see them. They tend to be very action oriented. They take chances. They're great at taking risks. So he was coming back. He just graduated from pharmacy school. Of course, in my mind, I'm like, okay, well, that's definitely not, doesn't necessarily fit, the idea of a shark, right? And I kind of knew that going in when he first joined pharmacy school, but hey, he's not my kid, so I didn't say anything, none of my business, right? But now he's graduated and we're shucking oysters, and I said, oh, so like, what do you want to do now? And he's like, well, I don't know, as long as I don't have to be in the same place for the whole day. And I'm like, well, if you're a pharmacist, that's pretty much what most pharmacists do is they stay in one place and they um and so what I recommended was like, oh, maybe you should get into pharmaceutical sales because then you'll be able to like go to different places, you'll be able to travel, you can talk to different people. I mean, you're going to have to hustle, and anything you get, you're going to have to really, really earn, and there's going to be a lot of failure, and you're going to take some risks. But sharks are okay with that. And he was like, oh, that does sound like a lot of fun, but I don't know if I want to waste all this time I spent learning all this material in pharmacy school. And I was like, yeah, but you only have one life. Do you want to waste that doing something you don't like? And he was like, yeah, that's a good point. So I don't know. I use that as an example of like where the things, well, knowing our personality can really help us kind of find our path. But even within a path, right? Like you can't say like, oh, this personality type is going to be great in medicine. I mean, there are a lot of fields and a lot of different ways that you can kind of find your path in medicine. Just to use an example. I think that's one of those too. Like even you study pharmacy, but you can find different paths within that path that kind of fits you better.
So that's a good example in the sense that you can reach that person before they start off their career. What if they realize that their current career is incompatible or perhaps in conflict with their personality? Have you helped someone in that regard?
Yeah, I do have, especially my adult students or adult clients, I should say, they tend to be, I mean, not to put a paint a wide brush, but they tend to be in their 40s, maybe early 40s. And everybody's like, that's a midlife crisis. And I always say, like, only certain personality types have a midlife crisis. Others, I say their whole life is a midlife crisis because there's one pack of personalities that they seek, their entire value system is based on self-knowledge. So they're constantly questioning themselves. So of course, that's going to be your entire life is going to be a midlife crisis at that point. But yeah, like I think a lot of times people in their 40s just like, yeah, like, I hate my job and I never really thought about it too much because I thought, that was what I wanted and I just want to take care of myself. And it's really more about just giving them the confidence to quit, but in a way where they're still like safe and they feel safe, right? Like it's more of a gradual thing versus like, it's expanding the person's bubble versus like just popping it. And yeah, I have helped a lot of people with that too.
And what was it like to write the book?
I mean, the writing was fun. Like it was actually pretty quick. I know a lot of people don't like. I tell if the first question people always ask is how long did it take to write the book, and I'm always like, oh, I don't know, like a couple months. And like what? And it's like, well, it's like I already had it in my mind how I would structure it. I already have some content on my website, and a lot of it just came really quickly. And then of course there was the rewriting after that. But for the most part, like it came from experience. There's a lot of like specific examples from whether it's like personal examples for myself. There are also obviously professional examples, though I try to keep those. I don't want to mention students that much, but a lot of it came from very specific practical reasons. So that I think that people can like digest it better. They can connect abstract theories with like concrete like experiences, right?
And has anyone ever said to you, these don't apply to me. I must be outside the 16 personality
Yes,
types.
that happened quite a
Was
bit.
it
Generally,
was it like insulting? Were you like, this is not possible?
no, I'm not a big person. I'm not really into certainty, so I'm always like, yeah, like you're never gonna like totally be 100% one thing. It's more, I wrote the book to encourage people to want to understand people better. I think the funny thing is, I think the people who say, oh, you can't categorize people. I'm not into categorization. But though the same person who says that will immediately say, oh, well, that person is this race or this ethnicity, so they like this, or if that person's a dude, so he's gonna like this, he's gonna like football, like they make I'm like, that is like the worst kind of categorization because that's very simplistic, very simple. And just our own practical experience tells us that when you make categorizations based on gender, ethnicity, like it doesn't fit, most of the time, right? So I think sometimes when the same people who tell me that, like, oh, I don't fit into any of these things, they just have simpler categorizations that they're used to. It's just that thinking this way is kind of unusual for them, or they just want to think that they're capable of everything. I think a lot of times when people read this, personality types are, oh, wait, are you saying that I can't do this other thing that this personality does better? And my feeling is like, no, that's why mine is based on what people desire and what they want. If you want something, then you're going to practice it more and you'll probably get better at it. But like, it doesn't mean that you can't do things. Of course, people can do whatever they want. They can be good at anything if they practice long enough.
Yeah, I'm just thinking from your perspective, you're like, this person's disagreeable. They
Uh,
fit well with this animal.
I will say everyone can be disagreeable, but they'll be disagreeable in their own specific way based on their animal type. Like I like to focus on negative things, and I know people are like, negative, that's so terrible. But once again, the problem is you focus on positive things, and will constantly go, oh yeah, then that's me, right? But if you focus on negative things, a person will only claim a personality type if it actually does fit, right? When it comes to negative traits, we're only going to claim it if it fits, right? If you're a flaky person and then someone says you're rigid and overbearing, you're probably going to be like upset, right? You're like, no, no, that doesn't fit me. But if someone says, oh, sometimes you can be a bit flaky and irresponsible, I think you're probably, okay, I admit that's me. I think the negative is a little better for that.
Well, you mentioned the news appearance previously. What was that like, and how did it come about?
Oh, it was just my publicist got me on the news essentially, and it was fun. I mean, once again, finding out animal personality type is always a bit of fun, right? Like, who doesn't want to figure out whether they're like, oh, I'm a panda, and like, yeah, it's all about you, right? That's why my website's called Utopia, like YO Utopia. And I think, yeah, the news was just fun, and it came about that way, and I just spoke for a few minutes, and I typed well, they had already taken the test, so the only problem is I was watching in the green room and they had mentioned what they got on the test. So then I couldn't guess. but it was kind of fun because based on what I knew, like if I knew someone was a dolphin, I know about what a dolphin is like. So then it's in a weird way, it's almost like mind reading, and that I you can ask your questions and they're generally going to hold true. And it's not like a trick. It's just because it's people, it's patterns of behavior with people, right? And going through working in the education company, we'd have once again 1,000 students a year. So that's about I worked for a decade, so 10,000 students. You see 10,000 students with 10,000 sets of parents, and you see how these different personalities interact. There are patterns of behavior.
Well, normally under that scenario, I typically ask, were you nervous going on, live TV, all that? But you look pretty chilled to me.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I think everyone's always kind of nervous because they don't want to mess up. And then I'm one of those people who is very, very nervous, like before anything. And then when the moment hits, then I'm just like, let's just do it. Like, what's the worst that can happen, right? Like, you're in the moment already. So, like, don't think about it.
Yeah, well, you look like a pretty chilled out dude. I'm interested to know, are there more books coming or, what's the goal for it? What's next for you?
I'd love to write the next book, which is the relationship book. I'd have to talk to my agent and my publisher if they'd like me to publish that. I guess the more books that I sell for this one, that'll increase the likelihood of a sequel. But that's the one that everyone always asks me. It's like, okay, now that I know you wrote a book that I can figure out what people are, but now that I know what people are, how can I use it to help me? Like, give me some specific prescriptions. And now, granted, I am not a relationship expert, so I would like to do a little bit more research before I start writing that. I mean, obviously, I speak to people about the theory and on a personal level, but on a professional level, that's something that I haven't done before. So, but that's the one that people ask the most about. So, I think that's going to be the next book is
I can
relationship.
totally imagine, let's say, married couples and being like, I'm in a relationship with a bear. I don't know what to do. Like, how do I navigate this relationship with this bear? I actually
Yeah.
don't know much about the bear, but, it's a funny statement.
Yeah, that's a question I get asked the most, and I'm always scared to answer because people ask like, "Oh, so what's my perfect type?" And I'm always gonna say there's no perfect type, especially because I know you're in a relationship just by the way you ask that question, and you're basically giving me a reason to say the person you're with is not good for you, which I don't even believe. I don't really believe in soulmates in that regard. I just believe that if you are this personality type and you're with a bear, then you're probably going to clash consistently based on your personality types for this specific reason. And you're also going to get along for this specific reason based on your personality type. And it's really, you got to be okay with it. That's pretty much would be or the point of the book would be just like, these are the things that are going to exist and be okay with it. If not, then that's probably when you should leave.
All right. Well, for people who are interested in taking the assessment, all that it's required is the email address, by the way, completely free. Where do they go?
So the assessment, I don't know the actual link, but it's on the utopiaproject.com website. And there are different articles that people have written about their personalities and about their experiences with that personality as well. But it's Utopia Project spelled YOU, like YouTube, utopiaproject.com, and you can find the assessment there.
Okay. And is there anything that I should have asked you about today?
No, I mean, I'm hoping I'm from LA. I'm hoping my Dodgers are winning right now. But yeah, no, I think it is great, and I hope people really take advantage of maybe at least taking the test, and if they find it's helpful, then purchase the book and the book you can get anywhere you buy books, Amazon if you want to give Jeff Bezos your money, but you can get on Barnes and Noble, wherever you order or buy books, you can find it there. It's called The Power of Personality. It's actually over my left shoulder. And the German version actually just came out a few weeks ago. So if you only speak German, even though you probably wouldn't be listening to this, but if you want to buy the German version, it also came out.
All right. Well, would you like to ask any qualifying questions, or are you going to take a guess at what personality type I was?
I'm going to ask one question. Were you a good student?
No.
Ooh, wow. That was okay. That was not one. Okay, I was.
But I will qualify that answer is that in my life, I'm a very good student, but I wasn't perhaps well suited to academia, but I'm always learning.
Interesting. Uh-oh. Oh, now I'm stuck. I was going with one. I'm gonna guess an owl. No, it was not
I
that.
wanted to be an owl though.
What did you
I
get?
thought that would be quite cool. I'm a beaver.
Oh, okay. Oh, not a good student and a beaver? Really? Beavers? You didn't like Oh, that's funny that I mentioned beavers. Oh, maybe that's generally beavers are like, at least by good student, I mean, they're like, not to say that you weren't hardworking, but they're like, oh, I need to write down my like the homework in my organizer, and I'll do exactly what I'm told because that's the authorities are telling me to do this, and I trust an authority because that's like kind of like the path that I should do because it's been proven to be correct. I don't know, does that fit or?
No, I thought when you mentioned the beaver, you were like, I already know this guy's a beaver, so I'm going to say it
Oh,
here. You totally could have gotten away with that.
no, I'm an honest person. This is the first time I've gotten it wrong. I'm so sad. I'm kicking myself. But I mean, well, I will say though, you do give off owl vibes, and I would just recommend maybe reading the portrait of the owl, and maybe because who knows, maybe that's fits more. Because the way you said lifelong, like learner in life versus school, that tends to be more of a not just an owl thing, but like a Smith thing. And Smiths are that specific pack, right? So, like, if would you say that you're more fond of safety and security or information?
Well, that's actually one thing which has changed with me recently. So I used to take a lot of risks. So I didn't used to mind taking risks at all. But as I've gotten older, my risk profile's changed. I'm quite risk averse at this point.
Hmm. I don't know. I still think maybe I still think you might be an owl or something around that. That would be my guess. But so the
Well,
test
I'll
you're wrong.
take it from the authority right here. I am an L.
Yeah, you said you wanted to be an owl, so that's probably truer to what you were, because it's probably connected with you more, versus a beaver. But
And what about you?
I'm a baboon, which is a very unattractive animal. So every time people complain, like I get complaints about being a beaver, I'm like, hey man, I'm like a baboon. No one's like clamoring to be a baboon. Okay. So like it's not about what animal is cooler, you know. If that was the case, everyone
Well,
would probably be a fox.
just for reference, the characteristics of a baboon, what are they?
Baboons are like they can be a bit loud, but they tend to, especially they can be a little bit loud when they really believe in something. So they're like advocates. They tend to really promote the ideas and principles and ethical theories that they really believe in, and they'll say their opinion about that quite a bit. But that's a lot different. That kind of extroversion is quite different than like a peacock, where a peacock would be the ones I always say they're the ones who, if you go to Cabo, they're doing body shots at the bar. Like that's different. Those are two different things. Preaching and body shots, two different kinds of extroversion for two different personality types. So yeah, I would not be the body shot person, but nothing wrong with that though.
Well, I've loved our conversation. I do think it's fascinating. And like you say, there are many benefits to doing it. So thank you for doing that work. And then also thank you for being a great guest today.
Oh, thanks so much for having me, Thomas.